Between 1974 and 1976, British jazz rockers Isotope released 3 albums on Gull. And from their second album, Illusion, apparently released in late 1974 in the UK, and the copy I had a 1975 date on it, so issued stateside via US Gull distributor Motown. From that album, the track Frog. Okay, over and done in 2 minutes and 32 seconds. And that was quite the showcase right there for fuzz bassist Hugh Hopper and guitarist bandleader Gary Boyle. Yeah, and it began 6-4-4-4. Yeah, so, or you could combine it as like 10-8. Yeah, 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4. This bass built on this chromatic ascent in like low G, like da 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 G, do 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 do, and then rising up. This for the 6, and then rising up to A for that 4. Yeah, and then basically fuzz bass, smoldering sustained notes throughout. Gary Boyle scaling, oozing notes high and low, amid brisk tom cymbal spray, and that's basically what characterized the track. I was listening for keyboards played by Laurence Scott, but I would have to play it again to I paused after I took all that down. I was like pausing and thinking, oh, now what is the keyboards doing? I'm listening, and this was basically a Hugh Hopper, Gary Boyle show, these 2 minutes with Nigel Morris on drums. Let's hear another track from the album, Temper Tantrum. Okay, that was Temper Tantrum by Isotope, the closing track on their 1974-75 second album, Illusion. And this one, let's see, Hopper a bit more subdued this time, but Gary Boyle showing that this is his band definitely, and hearing some keyboard interaction this time. Let's see. Began with this odd chordal start, this kind of diminished, demented chord right at the start over an unaccompanied sinister bass line. There would be like a moment or two of that, then a pause, and then that just pattern just repeated over and over again, like 4 or more times. And then at around the 45-second mark, suddenly this noodly acoustic scaly filigree kind of just entered and really forming quite a unique cadence there. That yeah, and Gary Boyle on acoustic guitar, I guess, and then after a bit, a jazzier flow commenced with fuller band, and then I heard like this like Fender Rhodes kind of mirroring that guitar scale, mimicking it at one point, and then the two of them started to interact and trade soloing, and then Gary, now like on electric, started deviating more from the whole structure, just kind of playing against everything and scaling upward further, while the Fender covered the lower notes with equal, fast-handedness. And Hopper subdued on this one, no fuzz this time, but angular nonetheless, just keeping it low, the low notes, the low end. And Gary scaling ever more intensely to the fade out, bringing back the acoustic at a few points there. Yeah, and the rhythm section of Nigel Morris, and well, drummer Nigel Morris and keyboardist Laurence Scott both giving us some like fine interaction, and yeah, everyone showing off their chops, and yet Gary Boyle, for the most part, emerging as the instrumental front runner in both these tracks. And indeed, it was his band. As a matter of fact, before this album was recorded, half the band walked out on him, I guess because he, kind of led his band with an iron fist. The half the members went on to form Turning Point, yeah, another jazz rock great that put out 2 albums, like circa 1977, 78. And this band would put out one more album after this, the kind of funkier, deep end. Oh, and now they're calling that a 1975 album. Huh. I thought that was a 1976 album. Well, once again, what was I just talking about in that Pete Brown and Poblocto video? Okay, I'm vindicated. I click on the actual Discogs page for the album. I click on the images, and the actual Gull labels say 1976, but that could be just, Actually, oh, yeah, I cherish the day when every single Trimax album, when the release date is finalized for all time. Yeah. Until then, yeah, Gary Boyle would also put out a great solo album in 1977, The Dancer. Yeah. And then another one the following year, Electric Light. But The Dancer is a really great album. And before forming his own band, Isotope, he had played with Mike Westbrook Orchestra, Brian Auger and the Trinity. And at one point, and had played with Stomu Yamashita's Eastwind, but at one point in like the mid-1960s, he played with a band called the T-Birds, one of many beat R&B groups of the period in the vein of like the Graham Bond Organization or the Artwoods. And other people to have passed through the T-Birds lineup included singer-songwriter Gary Farr, who put out some great singer-songwriter albums in the early 70s, and then fronted the Stateside act Lion for one album, with some 80s era, with one of the guys who would join the 80s era Uriah Heep, wrote the song "Running All Night with the Lion." Yeah, and another guy to pass through the T-Birds lineup was Keith Emerson. Although I don't think the three of them, Boyle, Emerson, and Farr, were in it at the same time, but 3 guys who went on to do great things. The things you learn when you research those lesser known beat era acts like 1964, 65, like every future star of the 70s seemed to have been in one of those acts. I mean, for every Rolling Stones or Who or Animals, bands that broke big in that era, there were 1,000 other bands like the League of Gentlemen, the original mid-60s League of Gentlemen with a young Robert Fripp, or The Warriors with a young John Anderson, and his buddy David Foster, not to be confused with the Canadian producer. Although John Anderson would ultimately work with both David Fosters. Yeah. Or the Syndicates with a young Steve Howe before he went on to the In Crowd, which became Tomorrow. Yeah. And of course, Keith Emerson, before, the T-Birds was like the first in his long walk to fame. After the T-Birds, he would be in the VIPs, which were a pre-Art, like mod R&B band. And then they became Art after he left, and then after Gary Wright joined, they became Spooky Tooth, yeah. And then finally, of course, Emerson formed the Nice, yeah, and then was finally kind of on his way, yeah. Really going off on quite a tangent there. Yeah, Gary Boyle, born in India in 1941 to British parents, and I believe, and so a little bit older than a lot of those musicians, actually. and of the beat boom. Yeah, yeah. The average seems like the average member of your typical beat era band was born like 1947, 45 to 47 seemed to be the average. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Isotope. Yeah, three great albums in a very intense period. Like Isotope were basically one of the three. Basically, you could say Isotope, Brand X, and Bruford were like the three main jazz rock bands. If you're aside from the Canterbury acts, which were slightly different stylistically. I mean, I'm talking more the international jazz rock sound of like Return to Forever. Yeah. Anyway, for more rubies and sapphires from the three Isotope albums, see the directory of albums by English I artists linked in the description below. Like and subscribe, follow me on social media, share the video, and leave a comment if there are any observations you have about the two tracks we just heard. The interplay, the soloing, the intensity, the scales, the different sounds, the meters, and yeah, the harmonics of it all. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most irritable maximalist, signing off.